doesn't really matter what we say, it matters how we say it. Hello y'all, welcome back to another video dedicated to help you break out of the cycle of toxic behaviors and relationships in your personal and romantic area of your life. My name is Coach Annette from Antoinette the Exito, and if you like anything personal development or healthy relationships, make sure you hit subscribe and join the tribe. In this video, we're going to be talking about 10 communication rules that me and my partner follow to maintain healthy communication in a relationship. Now, we all know how important healthy communication is. I made tons of videos on it already. However, if you've been in a relationship, you know how hard communication can be and how easy it can be to miscommunicate. And this is because we don't know what to say when we're trying to communicate our feelings, because we're not used to it. We never learned how to set boundaries or share. And not only that, but we don't know how to communicate in the first place. Maybe our tone of voice is harsh, we come across attacking our partner instead of being one with them. I decided to make a quick list of 10 simple rules that you can follow and keep in mind with your partner as you try to communicate healthily. I do want to note that these communication rules and setting boundaries isn't going to work if only one person is willing to do this. So make sure that both of y'all are willing to grow and learn to understand and be patient with each other as you learn to communicate. And make sure you watch to the end to catch the common mistakes that a lot of people do in communication that you want to avoid. With that said, number one, the 72-hour rule. Now, I didn't come up with this rule myself. In fact, I heard it from Madison Dodell. I hope I'm saying the name right. And she explains that when it comes to conflict, you want to ask yourself, will this problem that we're talking about still matter in 72 hours? And if it's a yes, then make sure that y'all talk about it and resolve the problem, because it's gonna come up over and over again. And if it's a no, then choose to let it go. You are in charge of what you let bother you and affect you, and sometimes there are small pet peeves or mistakes that you and your partner do. Choosing to let it slide and let it go isn't always a bad thing, because we don't always want to be nitpicking your partner's every single move. And of course, going back to if it is a yes, then make sure that you guys talk about it when you're both a lot more calmer, you're cooled down, and not immediately jumping into it when you're both feeling 10 out of 10 emotions, because most likely you're gonna end up saying something that hurts the other partner. And as a bonus, something that I do myself and also tell my clients is that if you're unsure whether or not this is gonna bother you after 72 hours, allow yourself to wait 72 hours and then decide whether or not this is something worth talking about, or if this is something that is not bothering you anymore. I know a lot of us who are not attuned to our emotions, we're not really sure whether or not we feel upset about it until afterwards, or maybe it takes like another day or two to process our emotions. Sometimes those feelings come back up and we're not sure what to do with them. So if you're constantly questioning, is this a big deal? Is this not a big deal? Should I bring it up? Should I not bring it up? Give yourself 72 hours to decide for yourself and then make the decision. Because if it's still bothering you after 72 hours, then it is a big deal. And number two, this is the 3 times rule. And this rule is very similar to number one, but if you find yourself having an argument not once, but 2 to 3 times, you want to start keeping an eye on that, because that's most likely not just a one-time thing, but more so a pattern and behavior that either your partner or you have that is constantly going to come up. And because it's a pattern and a behavior, it might take a little bit longer to find that compromise and solution and resolve that conflict. So keep in mind, it might require a little bit more patience than other problems that are a quick fix. Note down that this is something you want to find a solution and compromise to, because it will continuously come up over and over again, and if you don't resolve it, it's going to build up resentment. And this leads us to number 3, bring it up and stop hiding how you're feeling. For all my people pleasers out there, as a former people pleaser, I know how easy it is to just tell yourself it's not a big deal, I don't really want to talk about it, I just want to avoid confrontation, I don't want to cause a problem and then set off the relationship. And these are all narratives that come from growing up or being in toxic relationships, where whenever we spoke about our problems or issues, it would turn into this huge fight and cause a biggest ruckus than you want it to be. Subconsciously, that makes you feel unsafe, because you think, oh, I'm pushing them away, they're gonna lose interest, they're gonna abandon me, they're gonna think I'm rejecting them, so they're gonna reject me. And so you choose to keep the peace and not say anything because you fear the consequences. But I'm telling you right now, in a healthy relationship, an argument and disagreement is not going to make or break the relationship unless the relationship was unstable to begin with. If you're in the same route as me and you're trying to find a partner to build a family with, you're trying to have a long-lasting, healthy relationship, then you don't want to choose someone that sets off really quickly and is not that safe space for you. Because it is inevitable that problems are going to arise in a relationship. Problems are probably going to get even harder when it comes to marriage, and now there's finances to deal with, now there's kids to talk about. If you don't have someone that will talk it out with you, rationalize the problem, sit down and have an adult conversation, then you're gonna feel very one-sided and alone in the future anyways. And that is not someone that you can rely on. So cut out that habit to continuously hide things if you know you're gonna be upset about it later. Give your relationship a chance and talk about it up front with them. The more honest you are in your relationship, the more vulnerable you can be, the more intimate and safe you can feel in your relationship. Trust your partner enough to know that they can handle it with you. And if it takes a little bit more time and patience, that's okay, as long as y'all both are willing to work on it together. That's what matters. Number 4, speak as if you were a team and not me versus you. And I talked about this concept in some of my other communication videos, but I really want to drill this down and not just talk about the language that we're using to speak as a team, but also your body language and tone of voice that you're portraying as you're trying to communicate. So not only are we using the words we and us to solidify that we're a team and making sure that we're straying away from you always do this, you never do this, I versus you, but we're also making sure that our tone of voice and body language is aligning with our message. I have a lot of clients that come up to me and tell me that they tell their partner, I want to talk to you as if I was in a team and I'm using the language we, but it still seems like there is a disconnect and my partner still feels like I'm attacking him or her. And the most common reason why this happens is because most likely your tone of voice and your body language is not aligning with your words. And I've been guilty about this before, but we need to remind ourselves that it doesn't really matter what we say, it matters how we say it. Because I can go up to my partner and I can be like, oh, how are you doing? Kind of like a sweet voice, very curious about their day, good vibes. Versus if I go up to my partner and say, what are you doing? And if you heard that, there was an underlying accusatory tone of voice. It was like I was interrogating or testing them, which will most likely make them feel like they need to defend themselves. You can still be real and hold each other accountable. However, watch how you're speaking to your partner. Think to yourself, like, am I speaking to my partner as if they were my enemy or like my villain and I'm like yelling and being condescending and telling them what to do and being disgusted? Or am I speaking from a place of compassion? Am I being understanding, empathizing, but still telling them how it is to make sure that they're living their best life? If you want to build a healthy relationship, you probably want it to be the latter. Number 5, you don't have to communicate everything. This might sound a bit contradictory to the points I made before. However, it still applies within that 72-hour rule. Because there's always going to be things that we dislike and small pet peeves that we have, and that's okay. Because we also have small behaviors and habits, and we're not going to change every single thing about us, right? We don't go into a relationship trying to change the other person. When it comes to communication, there's either 2 ways that we can go about it. Either 1, am I willing to accept and tolerate this behavior for the rest of my life together with them? Or am I not willing to tolerate and accept this behavior? Now, of course, number 1, we should never tolerate and accept our non-negotiables, treating us less than the bare minimum, abuse, whether it's emotional or physical. And for the things that we are willing to accept, these might be small inconveniences or habits that they have. It doesn't irk and bother us to the point that we know it's going to boil up resentment. The thing is, we choose to accept this because we know that we also have these small quirks or behaviors that might annoy or bother them for a second, but they accept it because they know that that's just who you are, and love is about accepting those parts of you. For example, maybe your partner's not a huge texter and closeness is important to you, so you appreciate those texts. However, maybe they're not the best at it, and so they told you that they're working on it. However, this is going to take time to work on because it's a habit and a pattern. They don't usually text, right? So you have to ask yourself, are you okay with the text being less frequent? Are you okay with like the flows and the ups and downs with the text because they're not consistent with it? You have to keep in mind all their other behaviors too, because every relationship is different. You know, is it they're not close to you at all? They don't text, call, or even see you? Or is it just they're really present whenever they hang out with you and they're really good with calling you, checking up on you, but with the text, it's just lacking a bit. Personally, for me, if they show up 100% in person and they're also calling and FaceTiming me, then I'm okay with that, because my needs are still being fulfilled and I still feel that closeness with them, even though we might not be texting as much as I would like. And so every time they don't text me, yes, I can give those little reminders here and there, but I'm not going to constantly nitpick and criticize them for not texting me and accuse them that they don't care about me when it has nothing to do with me and it's most likely just a habit that they have. And so you choose whether or not you're going to be okay with these things. And if you know that you can tolerate it, then let it go. You don't have to speak up about every single little thing. Honestly, that's the reality of a relationship. It's not always going to be perfect and not everything's going to be your way or their way. It's a compromise and it's filled with hard work to make it happen. Also, do want to know it's important to see how they react to the things that you're saying, because if they're absolutely not willing to change at all or compromise at all, that is one of the number one sneaky red flags you want to look out for when you're communicating with your partner. Because if they're not willing to work on something that infringes on both of y'all's values, then that's probably a no-go. And number 6, understand your partner's patterns of communication and closeness. This is not so much of a rule, more so something that will help you communicate and also self-soothe for yourself if you're ever feeling upset in a conflict. A lot of us have different communication patterns. The most common ones are, number 1, does your partner usually shut down, withdraw, say things like, I don't know, they have a hard time processing their emotions and they immediately kind of just withdraw themselves whenever there's conflict? Or does your partner feel the need to fix things right away? They want to talk about it right there and then. They get very anxious, frustrated, and they're all up in your face. Those are the polar opposites of each other. However, what I notice happen a lot is that these two type of communicators are usually the ones in relationships where you have someone withdrawing a bit more than the other person who wants to solve it right away. And so if you're identifying with this and you know that this is a pattern that your partner communicates in, you want to keep in mind that this is more so a way that they're communicating because they want to protect themselves. A lot of times the way that they're communicating has nothing to do with you and has nothing to do with your worth, whether or not they care about you or losing interest. It's more so about them trying to protect themselves. Understanding how your partner communicates can be very helpful to try to work on building vulnerability and healthier communication in the future. For example, like understanding your partner might need a bit more space and it has nothing to do with you, giving them 5 minutes, a breather, or understanding that you want to solve things right away and you feel this need to just get up in their face and get that validation. Maybe it's a good sign for you to self-soothe before you jump into that conversation, and make sure you cool down before you make any decisions. I can absolutely make a video on this a lot more in depth, so if you're interested in that, make sure you comment that down below. But moving on to rule number 7, there is absolutely no screaming and yelling when it comes to having healthy communication. Me and my partner do not raise our voices at each other because we know that that can turn pretty south very quickly. In my past relationships that were toxic, I would find myself almost having like a fight between who can be the loudest in the relationship so that we can shut the other person up. And that's what it is. When we scream, when we get louder, it's almost like we're so desperate to have our message be understood and shut the other person down. But that's not how a healthy relationship works. We don't communicate to shut the other person down. We communicate to understand each other. And at the end of the day, words do hurt. Whether it's you said in the moment because you're feeling absolutely frustrated and then you regret it later and feel immense guilt, that will still hurt your partner and it will still be stuck in the back of their mind. So make sure when you're communicating, you don't find yourself raising your voice. If you do, it's an indicator that it's time to take a break, cool down, and come back to this conversation later. And not only this, when you're having a conversation, when your emotions are so heightened, it's hard to think rationally, and at that point, you're just speaking out of pure emotion. So make sure you keep this in mind. And number 8, reiterating my last point, speak to understand and don't speak to win. Conflicts and arguments is not a competition. It doesn't matter if you win or the other person wins. One person is gonna feel hurt at the end of it if someone wins. Why would your end goal be wanting to hurt your partner? That should not be any of y'all's goals. So enough with the keeping score. Number 9, be patient. Healthy communication doesn't happen like this, especially if you grew up in a household where you learn that boundaries are selfish or it's not safe to speak up in conflicts. So it might take more time than you think to have this healthy communication with your partner and to be fully safe to feel vulnerable and talk about your emotions. And that's okay. Building that trust takes time, but that's what makes the foundation so strong. If trust and building that safe space was so easy to build, it's most likely so easy to destroy as well. Because these things don't just happen. It takes belief and repetition over and over again, especially for someone who overthinks. So remember to hold patience for each other and speak to each other kindly and compassionately, and give yourself grace as well. Take it step by step. And number 10, stop using the things that happened in the past to use against them in your current arguments. Because what's happening is that when you bring up things from the past, even when it's been resolved already, you are telling your partner that whatever they're going through right now is invalid because of this thing that happened already. So here's what we need to keep in mind. Number 1, we can't change the past. Of course, we can absolutely talk about things that happened if it still hurts us. However, if we're using it against them to make them constantly feel guilty and bad, that is when you're feeling a cycle of hurt and pain. Not only this, when you're using something in the past past to invalidate how your partner is feeling now, they're not going to feel safe bringing up things to you in the future. You're gonna think whatever I have to say is invalid because I've done this before. And that's not true. New things and new experiences happen every day, and all emotions are valid. You can feel upset, but it doesn't mean that the other person's automatically wrong. Allow yourself to hold space for each other's emotions and understand that it's okay to experience it. Allow them to experience it and allow yourself to experience it. But I hope this helps. That's it for the 10 rules that I like to keep in mind when it comes to communication. Comment down below which rule you'll take away and use in your relationship. And if there's any rules that you have that I haven't talked about in this video, comment that down below as well. But I hope this helps. And if you want to understand boundaries a lot more in depth, because yes, these rules are great, but I always encourage my clients to learn about the different types of boundaries and how to practice communicating healthily in the first place. So if you're interested in doing that, make sure you click the link in my description to work with me one-on-one. Like and subscribe, and as always, you got this.